January 2025. Multiple fires erupted across Los Angeles County within hours. More than 10,000 structures were destroyed, and entire communities fled as winds drove flames into the suburbs. This was a disaster that should not have happened. Every warning sign was already there. Months before the first flames, Southern California's landscape was already on edge. The region entered 2025 with rainfall totals at just 4% of normal, an anomaly mapped in stark red on NOAA winter precipitation charts. Not a single significant storm had reached Los Angeles since the previous spring. By January, the hillsides and canyons stood parched, their grasses and chaparral registering at critical moisture thresholds. Live fuel moisture readings, tracked weekly by state agencies, showed levels dropping below those seen in notorious fire years. The heat only added to the danger. Temperatures ran 2 to 4 degrees above average, compounding the drought's effects and accelerating the drying of plants that had flourished during the wet winters of 2022 and 2023. This combination of record-low precipitation, persistent warmth, and dense, brittle vegetation left millions of acres primed for ignition. In these conditions, it would take little more than a spark to set disaster in motion. On the morning of January 7th, the first reports of fire came from the steep canyons above Pacific Palisades. Investigators later confirmed arson as the cause, an intentional act that reignited dry chaparral behind hillside homes and set off what would become the Palisades Fire. While the flames raced south, a separate ignition flared in the foothills near Altadena. The official cause of the Eaton fire remained under investigation for weeks, with attention turning to a transmission tower standing amid brittle brush. Public records show no final ruling, but the proximity of electrical infrastructure raised questions about neglected maintenance and whether utility lines should have been powered down during red flag warnings. The clustering of these starts, both deliberate and suspected accidental, exposed how a single spark, human or infrastructural, could trigger disaster when the landscape was primed to burn. By midday, Los Angeles County was facing multiple active fires, each with its own ignition story, but all feeding on the same underlying vulnerabilities. Santa Ana Wines arrived with a force that defied containment plans. By midday on January 7th, gusts near 100 miles per hour blasted across Los Angeles County, turning every ember into a missile. Fire commanders described embers leaping entire freeways. Flames vaulted from canyon brush into backyards in seconds. National Weather Service logs recorded wind-driven firebrands as landing more than a mile ahead of the main fronts, igniting spot fires in neighborhoods thought safe. Attempts to hold containment lines faltered as the wind's speed and direction shifted unpredictably. Incident reports noted walls of flame advancing so quickly that ground crews were forced to retreat, conceding ground as fires crossed both natural and man-made barriers without pause. By the afternoon of January 7th, flames reached the edge of Los Angeles suburbs. Entire blocks in Pasadena, Brentwood, and Altadena were caught between advancing fire lines and stalled evacuation corridors. More than 10,000 homes and businesses were damaged or lost as firebrands leapt from rooftop to rooftop, overwhelming firefighting efforts. Traffic cameras captured miles of gridlocked vehicles on the 210 and the 405 freeways, engines idling as families abandoned cars and fled on foot. Emergency dispatch logs recorded repeated calls for rescue from neighborhoods now cut off by walls of flame. Attempts to coordinate mass evacuations faltered as major arteries clogged, leaving thousands stranded in harm's way. The disaster, once confined to wildland canyons, now consumed entire communities. Its scale was measured not just in acres burned, but in the sheer number of lives and homes left defenseless. 27 people lost their lives as the fires swept through Los Angeles County. The official fatality report released by county authorities listed victims ranging from children to the elderly, many trapped by blocked evacuation routes or overtaken by sudden walls of flame. Shelter census logs recorded tens of thousands forced from their homes, crowding into schools, sports arenas, and temporary shelters with little warning. Families arrived with only what they could carry, uncertain when or if they would return. Hospitals across the region reported a surge of patients suffering from burns, smoke inhalation, and trauma, pushing emergency departments beyond capacity. Medical staff worked through the night as ambulances lined up outside, each carrying another casualty of the disaster. The scale of loss and displacement left entire neighborhoods hollowed out, the human cost measured in lives interrupted and communities uprooted. Behind the chaos, the city's defenses had long been eroding. Southern California Edison and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power deferred hundreds of millions in critical transmission line maintenance, prioritizing less risky distribution upgrades, even as wind events grew more severe. CAL FIRE's prescribed burn programs faced chronic underfunding, and planned fuel treatments were postponed year after year, leaving dense brush to accumulate near power corridors and neighborhoods. The Los Angeles County Office of Emergency Management struggled with limited surge capacity and patchwork coordination, as deployment logs show mutual aid was stretched thin by simultaneous fires across the state. These gaps were not hidden. Budget reports and after-action reviews documented the shortfalls, but action lagged behind risk. The disaster that unfolded was shaped as much by these preventable lapses as by the drought and wind that fueled the flames. Warnings were not in short supply. The Storm Prediction Center issued an extreme fire weather outlook days before the outbreak, and state bulletins repeated the message. Southern California now faced a year-round fire season, yet these advisories went largely unheeded. The result was a bill measured in billions of dollars, with property losses, uninsured homes, and a spike in insurance premiums across the region. Smoke from the fires choked the air for weeks, degrading air quality for millions of people and adding long-term health costs that cannot be tallied on a single ledger. Warnings were clear, yet preparation lagged. As extreme weather intensifies, systemic failures turn risk into catastrophe. The next disaster isn't a question of if, but when. What changes before then?